Damian Lillard just dropped 40 points in a win against the Los Angeles Clippers, this being just his third 40-point game of the season this year. And not to be too much of a Debbie Downer after a really good performance, but I couldn't help but feel as I was watching this game go along that we haven't seen this version of Damian Lillard damn near all season. Hello everybody, welcome to Frosty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference in how this video performs in the YouTube algorithm. Also, tomorrow is going to be our top 50 podcast with me, Alex Hoops, and Rudy on the shoot around. So be sure to stay tuned for that. That is going to be quite an experience, I am sure. We're doing a cumulative list of all of our top 50 players in the NBA. With that said, for today's video, I'm going to be talking about this Clippers-Bucks game. I'm going to talk about the Lakers-Thunder game and the Bulls-Kings game. So it's been a while since we've done something that was so post-game recap heavy, but there really hasn't been too much narratively going on in the NBA right now. We're starting to get towards that stage of the season where we're all just kind of waiting for the playoffs to happen, which feels a little crazy, honestly, because it feels like the season's just freaking started, but at the same time, it definitely hasn't. There's only about 20 games left to go, and we probably have a hell of a postseason ahead of us. But I digress. First, let's talk about this Clippers versus Bucks game. The Clippers being one of the best teams in the league ever since the initial losing streak when they traded for James Harden. From there, they've had one of the best records in the entire NBA, and they managed to lose a game to the Milwaukee Bucks, who did not have Giannis, because Damian Lillard went off on really both ends of the floor, weirdly enough, because a lot of this was also that Damian Lillard, who ended up being Kawhi Leonard's primary defender in the fourth quarter and for decent stretches of this game, ended up holding Kawhi to 16 points on 6 for 19 shooting, which is not very good. Really, everybody else for the Clippers, their main guys showed up. Paul George had 29, and actually, this is a rare case of Paul George having a good game when I watch, because typically speaking, he doesn't. I don't know what it is this year, but every stinker that Paul George has ever had this year, that was the game that I decided to tune in. So it's nice to see him, be good and be Paul George. So good on him for that. James Harden was also really good. He was really, really efficient, had 29 and 8. Norman Powell sucked. That's not actually that surprising, because he's also been one of those guys who kind of stinks every time I tune into a Clippers game. Kawhi, being as down as he was, ultimately was the deciding factor in this one. But Damian Lillard going downhill in this one in particular was the real difference maker. Obviously, his three-point shooting this season has been disappointing, and he went 4 for 9 from outside in this one at 44%, so that's good. But his ability to get downhill, him having a ridiculous amount of burst, that is where he kind of opens up the rest of his game and really earns his points. He got 13 free throw attempts today, making all of them, got to the rim quite often. There's a question of how much of that is a matter of not having Giannis there, because obviously Dame is looking at that and saying, okay, I need to step up my production to fill that void. There was no Chris Middleton as well. I know Chris Middleton isn't quite Chris Middleton of old, but he is still a pretty significant part of that offense. So Dame did have a lot more of a burden to deal with. However, I don't know. I feel like how much of this season has been Dame genuinely being bad versus him just adjusting to a new environment. How much can we actually expect from him in a playoff setting is something I'm curious of, because he clearly illustrated in this game that he has the ability to be Portland Damian Lillard as we've known him to be, but he also hasn't done that consistently. And in this case, he hasn't done it without Giannis, and that's not exactly ideal, because you want your two best players to play well together. Just to speak for the rest of the Bucks in this one, this is also a huge game from Bobby Portis. Off of the bench, he managed to get 28 points and 16 rebounds, ended up being the guy that they closed the game with, because Brook Lopez was not particularly special in this one. And we also got a very, very big game from Patrick Beverley, who finished the game with a block, 4 steals, 9 rebounds, despite the fact that he's, tiny, 12 points, and he went 3 for 7 from outside. The Clippers were daring him to hit those threes, and he was doing it. I saw a funny remark about how Patrick Beverley being bounced around the league as much as he has means that he has so many revenge games all the time. And Patrick Beverley seems like he loves revenge because he's that type of guy. Overall, pretty impressive win from the Bucks. I do want to highlight this as well. They had a very good defensive performance overall here, and since Doc Rivers has become their head coach, their defense has been really good. They have had the 6th best defensive rating in the entire NBA ever since Doc has become their head coach, where they were in the high, do you say high or low 20s? Like around 20-ish in the league in defensive rating previous to this. So, I did say that Doc Rivers ultimately is an upgrade over Adrian Griffin. It's just a matter of like, do you want to lock yourself into a minor upgrade when you could go for a major one, and also doing it in the middle of the season is weird. But I do think that at least in terms of the ceiling of this Milwaukee Bucks roster, weirdly enough, while I feel like Doc Rivers is a ceiling capper, I also feel like he has risen the ceiling of this Bucks team just by virtue of establishing more of a defensive presence, because especially if you can maintain this defensive presence while having the added benefit of being the best offense you have had in Giannis's tenure in Milwaukee, then you start to look at a very, very scary team, which honestly is a more accurate assessment of what I thought the Bucks were going to look like this year. I thought they were going to manage to still be a top 10 defense while having a ridiculous offense, and slowly but surely they are morphing into that team, and I'm curious how much of a threat they end up standing in the postseason, because the consensus really seems to be that the Celtics, they got the East under wraps. It's probably going to be them. If anyone's going to be a challenger, I think it's going to be the Bucks. And the way that they've played recently, this outburst from Dame, I think it's an encouraging sign. Speaking of NBA teams that I'm starting to believe in a little bit more, let's talk about the Los Angeles Lakers, who just got a really impressive win over one of the best teams in the NBA in the OKC Thunder. Big part of this was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander having a pretty quiet game, not getting his standard 31, instead getting just 20 points in this game, not playmaking all that well, only getting up 13 shots. J-Dub didn't really have a good scoring game either. This was a pretty rough performance from the OKC Thunder all around. Lou Dort showed up to play. He had 5 3-pointers by like the 10-minute mark of the third quarter. Didn't do anything else after that, but a lot of hot shooting early that was definitely very helpful and kept them in the game. Otherwise, as you may or may not have seen, D'Angelo Russell decided to just go nuclear at the start of the fourth quarter, which kind of put the game away. LA already had a lead, but for the most part, it had been fairly contentious, and there was a decent chance that OKC would pull away with the win, but D'Angelo Russell just hit a bunch of stupid, heavily contested threes back to back to back, and that made the lead pretty insurmountable, especially with the fact that OKC really did not shift their momentum in any capacity going into that fourth quarter. For their offense, they just kind of continued to get locked up. They finished the game scoring 104 points, which in the modern NBA is not a lot. Rough shooting game from them as a whole, and actually LA shot the 3-ball pretty well in this game, shooting 47% on 34 attempts. There was also Austin Reeves, who had a really big stretch shooting the ball. He went 4 for 5 from outside. Taurean Prince went 4 for 6 from outside. And how much you can rely on this and how replicable a game like this is for the Lakers is questionable. 3-point shooting in general is like, when the Lakers actually have their shooting going, they look pretty fucking unstoppable, but that just happens so rarely. So I do think a big part of that can just be chalked up to the threes were going in, and that mattered. Relatively quiet game from LeBron James, and by that I mean he had a near triple-double with 19 points, 11 rebounds, and 8 assists. Kind of a bland LeBron stat line. That's not all that impressive for him. 24 from AD, caught a bunch of lobs. Me and Rudy watching the game were talking about how much AD is like the GOAT lob threat in NBA history, but I do think that Victor Wembanyama has a decent chance of eclipsing him in that regard, because that guy is literally an alien. But yeah, very impressive win for the Lakers. Really good defense, hit their threes. This is what the Lakers look like when things are going well. It's just so inconsistent when you actually get that version of the team, but you'll get the version of the team and you see the upside, and you see the team that was capable of making the Western Conference Finals last year. And I don't know, they're 7-3 in their last 10. A lot of this has been D'Angelo Russell has been great, and that has started to help. But yeah, I don't have I don't have much else to say, but yeah, the Lakers, I wouldn't be surprised if they were a little bit better than a lot of people have chalked them up to be this season. And last but not least, I want to talk about my Chicago Bulls getting a victory over the Sacramento Kings. The Bulls have continued to chug away being a mediocre NBA team, but there have been things to be excited about to close out the year. Obviously, we're kind of in a transitional phase and we don't really know what the future looks like with this roster, but at the very least, we have Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu being really interesting young players with a lot of upside. Kobe White had the standout performance of this game, but I actually do want to highlight Ayo in general. Over his last 21 games, he is averaging 16 points per game, and he is shooting 47% from three on 5 attempts a night, also getting 4 assists and I think 4 rebounds in that stretch. The guy is a super talented passer, and on the season, he's shooting 40% from three. Really, really good defender, and like a solid enough slasher as well. He's pretty good inside the 3-point line. He makes the right decisions. His mid-range splits are generally pretty good. Just kind of efficient in all areas of the floor, and then a really, really positive defender. Yeah, but this stretch, the 16 points ain't nothing to dismiss for like a high quality role player. We're talking about a guy who's like 24 years old. 24 years old, yeah. Old. Can you imagine being 24? Ancient. Ayo Dosunmu, just wanted to highlight him. Lots of people outside of the Chicago Bulls fan base are well aware of Kobe White and his ascension this year, but Ayo Dosunmu has been slowly but surely having a pretty similar breakout. Not quite to the same extent, but definitely noteworthy. However, the standout performance in this one is, of course, the 37-7 performance from Kobe White, who went 14 for 19 from the field. Really, between the Bulls' 2 star players, who I would define to be him and DeMar, they both shot kind of fucking bananas in this game. DeMar went 10 for 12 from the field with 33 points, going 11 for 12 from the free throw line, and even going 2 for 3 from outside. So that was huge. So DeMar, the way the Bulls kind of operate now is it seems like Kobe is the first option and DeMar is this like kind of technically better more often than not player, but like he's kind of the stabilizing force. Almost like the vet among the younger guys. And I really like that dynamic for what it is. Obviously, I would like a lot of things about the Chicago Bulls to be different, but I don't know. It's exhausting just to be completely negative all the time, so I'm not going to do it here. On the other end for the Sacramento Kings, they had a rough one because they went up 20 points in this game, and it did not result in anything too pretty. They ended up blowing that lead as the Bulls, and specifically Kobe and DeMar, just could not miss their shots. Really pretty mid performance from just about everybody here. De'Aaron Fox under his scoring average. Sabonis had 18, but it took 19 shots for him to get there, even though he did get 21 rebounds. Keegan Murray, 11 points on 8 shots, whatever. Just no one really stood out too much, and they gave the Bulls a wide open opportunity to go ahead and pull away with this win. So yeah, that's my thoughts on these games. Not much else to it. Shout out to Nick for editing this video. Again, make sure you are there for our podcast doing the top 50 players in the NBA for 2024. But that is it. Goodbye.